Hello. So today I'm not going to talk about the next caveman rule because the whole point of this is for me to talk about different stuff that's going on. So today I want to talk about coping because it's an interesting thing, coping really, in what it does to your head and what goes on. Yesterday, Gibson, the puppy I told you about a couple of days ago, cut his paw. Don't know what he cut his paw on. He was outside, came in, everything was fine, sitting there chewing on a bone. And then my daughter noticed that there was blood on the floor next to him. And then as I looked around, there was blood all over the floor. I mean, really, these things can bleed. So I thought he'd bitten on something when he was eating the bone, and he hadn't. I checked his teeth, which he let me do, which was very good of him. Couldn't see anything. And then noticed that as he was walking, he was leaving a bloody mark behind. So I checked his paw, which again he was very good and he let me do. And it looked like he'd taken a slice out of his paw just up from the middle claw. No idea how he'd done that. Didn't seem to be in pain, wasn't even limping, wasn't whimpering, anything like that. Was quite happy for me to touch it, but it clearly was leaving quite a trail all over the place. So I found a bandage, wrapped it up, and found a small sock and then wrapped that up on top of it and put him in his crate for a while so that he wasn't hobbling around bleeding everywhere. And just for a moment, for a while, I got that really familiar sinking feeling. You know, the one you get where you go, oh, everything goes wrong, Why can't I just have some time where nothing's going wrong and I can just chill and relax? And you feel that wave of everything suddenly feeling like it's overwhelming you. And the interesting thing about that is that you don't tend to just stick at the problem that you're trying to deal with. You tend to look for everything else that is evidence of how rubbish everything is right now. So I start kind of going around all the other things that aren't working out very well. I start worrying about money. It's like, oh, it's going to go a vet's bill. I'm going to have to pay for the vet. What should I do? And you find yourself just sinking. And there's an interesting little law that is called Orr's law, which is called what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. So the idea here is you have a thought, and then your brain is tasked, like a sniffer dog really, to go out and find all the evidence it can that validates that thought. Everything that is not evidence for that thought gets totally deleted. Don't need to know that. It's not relevant. All you need, you get this kind of tunnel vision, all you need is things that give you evidence that that thought is the right thought. So I have a thought that is, oh, this is all going wrong. It's just further evidence of everything that's not working right now. And my prover, my sniffer dog, goes out and says, yes, because this then happens, and this then happens, and this then happens, and it kind of barrels out of control. And you find your mood go woomph right through the floor. And then this morning, we've had rotten weather here in Scotland right now, and it's been blowing gales 3 nights in a row. I've gone to bed and it's just been absolutely feeling like the house was going to take off. And I was convinced each morning I would actually find the cars blown over it. It felt that strong. And it was raining this morning, so much so that I couldn't get the dog to go outside when I got him up in the morning. I had to go out with him, get drenched, so that he was brave enough to go and do his business in this horrible wind and rain that was going on. And then when my daughter got up, she noticed that the ceiling was leaking. And there were drips coming through from the ceiling. And because my thinker was already engaged in, oh, everything's rubbish, I can't cope with anything, everything's getting on top of me, it was like, oh, right, that's just another thing. That means we're going to have the whole roof replaced. And my prover was doing a really good job of finding all evidence. And then everything that was good in the morning took a sideline. So my daughter was really good at getting up, getting dressed. She had a breakfast. Those things that you battle with normally with a 6-year-old first thing in the morning. She was being really good, but I was being really grumpy, and everything that she didn't do that I asked her, I focused on instead of all the things that she did really well. And then as I was sitting in the car, waiting for her to go into school, I realised what was going on. And this is the difference, really, between being in control of ourselves and not, because all of us have bad moods, rubbish times where everything gets on top of us and we feel like we can't cope. The difference is, can you get to a place where those things don't overwhelm you, don't take over your whole life? For me, I've got to a place now, and it's taken me a long time to be honest, where yes, those thoughts get on top of me. Yes, things overwhelm me, but I realise I can actually move on from there. I realise that a thought is just that. It's not real. It feels really real. If you think about an iceberg is so solid that you can build a house on it. But if the temperature changes by a couple of degrees, the iceberg ceases to exist. And thoughts are the same. I think Michael Neal or somebody said, we're one thought away from happiness. That's an interesting idea, isn't it? Bit much for most of us to reach. But if you recognise that thoughts are transient, they're not real, then when something comes into your head, it doesn't actually have to make camp and stay there. It can stay there for a while, but it doesn't have to stay there forever. It doesn't have to bring everything down. We don't have to do that thinker thinks, proveth proves thing. We can change what the thinker thinks. So if you change the thinker from thinking everything's rubbish to thinking actually it could be worse, my ceiling is only dripping lightly, it hasn't collapsed yet, so everybody will be getting in touch with their insurance companies. I can wait a couple of days. It's obviously only when the wind's in a certain direction and there's lots of rain. I'll wait a couple of days, I'll get in touch with the insurance company and we'll deal with it from there. When I took the bandage off my dog this morning, his paw was fine, and he's got an appointment with the vet first thing this morning. So the problems are as real as we make them. And I'm not saying this is easy. By a long shot, not allowing your thoughts to make camp is really difficult, but being aware that that rule exists, what the thinker thinks, the prover proves, allows you to change what the thinker thinks, or at least try. And by trying, that in itself moves you on. So that's the kind of thought I want to leave you with today. Because when a thought's in your head, it's really hard to change it. And what I find to do, I've got a really simple technique for getting through when everything's overwhelming me, is the first step is get it all out your head. Because actually, if you think about the energy that you use up to maintain a task list in your head, then how can you possibly spend time working through a task list when your head is keeping the task list? So the first thing is get it on a piece of paper, type it up, do something, get it out of your head so that you don't have to hold it in your head. And then remember, you can only do one thing at a time. All of us. This isn't about multitasking. We can only give our attention and our focus to one thing at a time. So if you've got a task list, no matter how big it is, no matter how urgent the items are on it, you can only do one of them at a time. And everything starts with the first step. So you take one step on one thing. And that's all you need to do. When you've taken that one step, you move. If it's not finished, you keep it on the list. If it's finished, you cross it off the list and move on to the next thing. And you can pick a mix between urgent stuff you need to do in a week, stuff that you'd really like to do. It doesn't really matter, but recognize that you can only do one thing. So no matter how many things you've got on top of you, all you have to do is start with one step and one thing. And that's the thought I'm going to leave you with today.